The forest was a cathedral of whispers, its emerald canopy stitched with threads of dawn. Sunlight slanted through ancient pines, dappling the mossy floor where dew clung like tiny glass beads. In this quiet sanctum, where the world felt both vast and intimate, lived a creature who defied the very nature of her kind. Her name was Sable, a bobcat with fur the color of dusk and eyes like twin moons, glowing with a warmth that could thaw the iciest heart. Unlike her kin, whose snarls echoed through the ridges, Sable did not bare her fangs or stalk with menace. She was a paradox, a wild thing who greeted every soul she met with a curious tilt of her head and a purr that rumbled like a distant stream. Sable's story began in a spring so tender it seemed the earth itself was holding its breath. She was born in a hollowed oak, her mother a fierce hunter who taught her siblings the art of the ambush. But Sable was different from the start. While her littermates pounced on beetles and hissed at shadows, she watched. She watched the way ants marched in perfect rows, the way sparrows danced in the wind, the way the forest seemed to hum with secrets only she could hear. Her mother, exasperated, would nudge her toward the hunt, but Sable's heart wasn't in it. She'd rather curl up beside a frightened rabbit than chase it, her soft paws brushing its trembling fur until it stilled. The forest folk whispered of her strangeness. The deer, who froze at the scent of any other bobcat, began to linger when Sable passed, their wide eyes curious rather than fearful. The foxes, cunning and solitary, found themselves drawn to her side, sharing stories of the stars. Even the old owl, perched high in his gnarled throne, hooted tales of a bobcat who was more spirit than beast. But not all were charmed. The wolves, rulers of the northern ridges, saw Sable's gentleness as weakness, a threat to the forest's unspoken order. Their leader, a grizzled brute named Kale, bared his teeth at the mere mention of her name. "A predator who does not hunt is no predator at all," he growled, his pack nodding in agreement. One morning, as mist curled through the valley, Sable stumbled upon a human child lost in the heart of the forest. The girl, no older than 10, sat shivering beneath a cedar, her clothes torn and her cheeks streaked with tears. Her name was Lila, and she'd wandered too far from her village, chasing the flicker of a firefly. Any other bobcat would have vanished into the underbrush, but Sable approached, her steps silent as moonlight. Lila froze, her breath catching, but Sable only lowered her head, her golden eyes soft. She pressed her warm flank against the girl, and Lila, too cold and frightened to question the impossible, buried her fingers in Sable's fur. They sat there until dawn, the bobcats purring a lullaby that kept the darkness at bay. Word of this encounter spread like wildfire. The village, nestled at the forest's edge, buzzed with tales of the kindly bobcat. Some called her a guardian, others a spirit sent by the old gods. But the wolves heard, too, and Kale's fury grew. To him, Sable's bond with a human was a betrayal of the wild. He summoned his pack, their eyes glinting in the moonlight, and declared that Sable must be driven out or destroyed. The forest, he said, had no place for a creature who broke its rules. Sable, unaware of the storm brewing, continued her wanderings. She greeted a weary badger with a playful nudge, shared a sun-warmed rock with a snake, and even coaxed a grumpy porcupine into a rare smile. But the air grew heavy, the shadows longer. One evening, as she drank from a crystal stream, she sensed eyes upon her. Not the curious gaze of a deer or the shy glance of a mouse, but something colder. She lifted her head, ears twitching, and saw Kale's silhouette against the ridge. His pack fanned out behind him, their growls a low thunder. Sable's heart quickened, but she did not flee. She stood, her tail flicking, and met Kale's stare with her own unyielding warmth. "You shame us?" Kale snarled, his voice cutting through the dusk. You coddle prey and humans alike. You are no bobcat. Sable tilted her head, her eyes steady. I am what I choose to be, she said, her voice soft but clear, like the chime of a distant bell. The wolves circled closer, their claws scraping the earth, but Sable did not move. Instead, she stepped forward, her purr rising, a sound so pure it seemed to weave the air itself into something brighter. The wolves hesitated, their snarls faltering. One, a young female named Vera, broke ranks, her ears flattening as she gazed at Sable with something like wonder. Kale lunged, his jaws snapping, but Sable was quicker. She darted aside, her movements a dance, not of fear but of grace. She did not fight back, only weaved through the pack, her purr unbroken. Vera, caught in the spell of that sound, turned on her own kin, her growl a warning. The pack froze, torn between their leader's rage and the strange pull of Sable's presence. Kale roared, his authority shaken, and retreated into the shadows, his pack trailing uncertainly behind. Sable returned to her wanderings, but the forest had changed. The wolf's challenge had stirred something deeper, a question that hung in the air. Could a creature like Sable truly belong in a world ruled by tooth and claw? Lila, now safely back in her village, spoke of the bobcat who saved her, her words planting seeds of wonder among the humans. Some began to venture into the forest, leaving gifts of woven blankets and carved stones at the base of Sable's oak. Others, fearful of the wild, whispered of curses and omens. As autumn painted the forest in gold and crimson, Sable found herself at a crossroads. The wolves would return, stronger and angrier. The humans, too, were growing bolder, their footsteps heavier in her sanctuary. And yet, Sable felt no fear, only a quiet certainty. She was not just a bobcat, not just a guardian. She was a bridge, a thread weaving the wild and the tame into something new. But bridges, she knew, could be fragile things, and the weight of two worlds might yet break her. Winter crept into the forest like a thief, stealing the warmth from the air and cloaking the trees in frost. The once lush cathedral of pines now stood stark, their branches heavy with snow, whispering secrets in a language sharper and colder. Sable, the bobcat who embraced all she met, moved through this frozen world with the same quiet grace, her dusk-colored fur dusted with flakes that caught the pale sunlight. Her breath puffed in soft clouds, and her golden eyes glowed brighter against the monochrome landscape. But the forest was no longer the haven it had been. The wolves, led by the unyielding Kale, had not forgotten their humiliation, and their hunger for order grew as sharp as the icicles that fringed the cliffs. Sable sensed the shift long before she saw it. The deer were skittish, their hoofprints erratic in the snow. The foxes, once her companions, darted into their dens at the faintest rustle. Even the old owl, whose wisdom had always steadied her, had grown silent, his amber eyes clouded with unease. The forest was holding its breath, waiting for a storm that Sable could feel in her bones. Yet she did not falter. She continued her wanderings, leaving pawprints that spiraled like poetry across the snow, pausing to nudge a shivering hare or share a moment's warmth with a frostbitten sparrow. Her purr, that soft hymn of peace, still wove through the air, but it carried a new weight, a promise, or perhaps a challenge. The humans, too, had changed. Lila's tales of the kindly bobcat had spread beyond the village, drawing travelers from distant towns. They came with offerings, braided cords, polished stones, even scraps of meat left at the base of Sable's hollowed oak. Some sought her as a blessing, others as a curiosity, but a few came with darker intent. A hunter named Torin, his face carved with scars and his heart hardened by loss, saw Sable not as a guardian but as a prize. "A bobcat that doesn't snarl," he muttered, his breath steaming in the cold. "Her pelt would fetch a fortune, and her legend more." He tracked her through the snow, his boots silent, his bow strung tight. One twilight, as the sky burned violet and the stars began to prick through, Sable found herself at the edge of a frozen lake. Its surface was a mirror, reflecting the world in crystalline clarity. She paused, her reflection staring back. A creature of paradox, wild yet gentle, solitary yet bound to all she met. The air grew heavy, and she turned to find Kale and his pack emerging from the trees, their eyes glinting like shards of ice. Behind them, unseen, Torin crouched in the shadows, his arrow nocked. The forest seemed to still, as if it knew this moment would decide Sable's fate. Kale stepped forward, his growl low and final. "You've poisoned this forest," he said, his voice a blade. "Your softness weakens us all. Tonight, it ends." Sable met his gaze, her tail flicking, her purr rising like a tide. "The forest is not yours to rule," she said, her voice steady, a melody against his discord. The wolves advanced, their claws crunching the snow, but Sable did not run. She stepped onto the ice, her movements deliberate, her eyes never leaving Kale's. The pack followed, their weight cracking the frozen surface, thin fissures spiderwebbing beneath them. Torin, watching from the shadows, saw his chance. He raised his bow, the arrow trained on Sable's heart. But as he drew back, a figure emerged from the trees, Lila, her small form bundled in furs, her eyes wide with fear and determination. She'd followed the tracks, driven by a bond she couldn't explain. "No!" she cried, her voice shattering the silence. Torin hesitated, his aim wavering. In that moment, the ice groaned under the wolf's weight, a deep, ominous crack splitting the air. Sable leaped, not toward safety but toward Kale, her body a blur of shadow and light. She didn't strike him. She pressed against him, her warmth a shock against his cold fury, her purr a plea. The ice gave way. Kale and his pack plunged into the frigid water, their snarls turning to panicked yelps. Sable teetered at the edge, her claws scrabbling, but she did not fall. Lila ran to her, slipping on the snow, and together they backed away from the crumbling lake. Torin, stunned, lowered his bow, his resolve crumbling like the ice. The wolves thrashed, but Vera, the young female who had once wavered, found solid ground and turned back, her eyes locked on Sable. One by one, the pack followed, shivering and subdued, their loyalty to Kale broken by the cold truth of their survival. Kale himself crawled onto the bank, his fur sodden, his pride shattered. He looked at Sable, not with rage but with something new, confusion, perhaps, or the first flicker of respect. She met his gaze, her purr unbroken, and then turned away, guiding Lila back toward the village. Torin vanished into the forest, his bow forgotten, his heart stirred by a story he could never unsee. The wolves dispersed, their unity fractured, and Vera lingered longest, watching Sable's silhouette fade into the snow. Spring returned, tentative at first, then bold. The forest bloomed anew, its whispers softer now, its secrets brighter. Sable remained, her legend growing with every season. The humans built a small shrine at the forest's edge, not to worship her but to honor the bridge she'd become. The wolves, under Vera's quiet leadership, kept their distance, their snarls tempered by memory. Sable never stopped her wanderings, never stopped embracing those she met. A deer, a fox, a child, a hunter. She was no longer just a bobcat if she ever had been. She was a story, a melody, a warmth that lingered in the forest's heart, proving that even in a world of tooth and claw, there was room for a creature who chose to love instead.